With Ghost of Tsushima releasing on Steam a few days ago, I thought it would be a good idea to revisit this game and to see what made it so special back in 2020. To me, Ghost of Tsushima filled a hole within the video game world that fans were crying out for. Years went by with fans wanting a true open world samurai experience. With the samurai genre not really being something that was dove into too much when this game was released in 2020, it was a dream come true for many fans out there. I played it for the first time this year, and this game was truly unbelievable, and the experience playing it was amazing. Being made by Sucker Punch Productions, there was a massive hype around this game. With Sucker Punch Productions being most well known for the infamous games, which were critically acclaimed by many, people thought it was a dream come true when they heard they were making a samurai game. And it did not disappoint in the slightest. They went out and made a better version of most of the Assassin's Creed games. This game was a massive success by winning multiple awards in that year, but not Game of the Year as they went to The Last of Us Part 2, which is very controversial in of itself, so comment below who you think should have won it in 2020. No game is perfect though, and Ghost of Tsushima does have its issues here and there that we'll get into in this video. But in my opinion, Ghost of Tsushima is the ultimate samurai experience, and I think it's going to be difficult for anyone to make a samurai game that's better than this one. With that being said, let's get into my review of Ghost of Tsushima. Starting things off, we have the setting, and this game takes place during the first Mongol invasion in 1274, and this is arguably the best part of this game. This is hands down one of the most beautiful games that I've ever played. There are so many unique environments, and this game constantly keeps it fresh with so many different climates and settings. This isn't some open world that just has one theme and style and the entire world looks like that. Ghost of Tsushima has multiple environments and settings that are all so beautiful. There are 3 different sections of the map in this game, and each one has a completely different climate. We have Izuhara in the south, Toyotomo in the middle, and Kamigata in the north. Each one of these sections has such a unique feel to it, and they really stand out from one another. This game is genuinely so beautiful, and I would explore simply to take in all the scenery. This game ranges from these beautiful snowy sections to these more swampy areas, and the flower fields might actually be the prettiest thing that I've ever seen. I would just stand in the fields and take everything in. Like, this game is actually breathtaking. The graphics were so good in this game, and they are up there with some of the best I've ever seen in any game. The atmosphere also was just fantastic, and some of the content in Ghost of Tsushima helps build the world even more, and you get so immersed. And also, the music in this game is amazing and makes playing and exploring even better. Moving away from the settings and the graphics and into the next part of this video, we have the gameplay. This also is up there with the setting as the best part of this game. I love the gameplay and the combat so much. It is fantastic in every way. This is up there with some of my favorite combat systems in any video game. There are 4 different stances, and they all help you against different enemy types. You have the stone stance, which is effective against swordsmen, the water stance, which is effective against shieldmen, there's also the wind stance, which is used for spearmen, and lastly the moon stance, which is best used against the brutes. I love all these different stances and having to switch between them depending on the enemies you come up against. And unlocking them throughout the game helped the progression move so smoothly. You generally felt stronger and stronger after every stance you unlocked. Also, the techniques in this game are fantastic. You have the deflection and evasion techniques that make the combat even better. But in my opinion, the best techniques in Ghost of Tsushima were the mythic techniques. Each one of these techniques had a mission and quest linked to them, and these missions were so much fun to do. There would be this whole story and lore behind these techniques, and you would go through the mission and unlock the technique. I'll go through the mythic tales later in this video and talk about them a little bit more in depth, but for now, they were some of my favorite parts about this game. Along with the techniques though, there are just other amazing abilities. One of these abilities is the standoff. I love using this in the game so much, and when you combine the ability with the Sakai clan armor, you can get a streak of 5 enemies using standoff. But arguably my favorite part about the combat is the ghost stance. This is like actually the coolest thing ever. You can use this stance once you take out 7 enemies without taking damage, or when you take out a Mongol leader. I feel like the coolest person to ever exist whenever I use this ability. Like, it's just awesome. Watching all the enemies stumble and be scared of you and you just taking all of them out back to back, it's amazing. But the combat in general is just fantastic. The way that the parrying and dodging are used in this game are so good. There are also 2 features called the perfect dodge and parry, and they slow down time when you time them perfectly, and it's just so cool to use. You generally feel so much like a samurai. It's one of those games where you just feel so cool playing it. Like being able to play as a samurai and the combat being as good as it is, it's a dream come true. One other thing I want to touch on is the armor. Besides Jin being the most dripped out main character maybe ever, these sets of armors are actually really useful in the game. Each of the different armor sets give you different boosts to your character and you actually notice them. The armor sets offer you a good amount of variety with how you want to play the game. They were just done so well in this game and they just also look so cool. Another amazing part of the gameplay is the stealth. This is something that I think is done very well in this game. It's not on the level of Dishonored or games like that, but it's still a very enjoyable stealth system. You get a bunch of different tools that you can unlock that can help you with stealth. You have the kunai, black powder bombs, smoke bombs, sticky bombs, and firecrackers. You also unlock the blowgun that carries poison darts and hallucination darts. The blowgun is probably the best weapon to use for stealth, like it's actually so OP. The combination of all these different tools, the bow and arrow, and just assassinating people, it makes stealth really fun in this game and I had a good time using it. There's a good amount of variety in the stealth, so it stays pretty fresh for most of the game, but it can start to get repetitive towards the end. Moving on to the bow and arrow, there's two different kinds of bows in this game. We have the half bow and the long bow. The half bow does less damage than the long bow and has a shorter maximum firing range. But the half bow has a better firing rate, faster drawstring, and more ammunition. So the half bow is definitely more practical in open combat. The longbow is very useful though if you're trying to do heavy amounts of damage to a few enemies. The bow is something that I used a lot in this game and was a great addition to the combat. But there is one part of the gameplay that I don't think is the best, and that is the enemy variety. In all honesty, there's just not that much variety within the enemies in this game. We have the 4 basic Mongol types with the swordsmen, shieldsmen, spearmen, and brute. We also had the Mongol archers, war dogs, leaders, and lastly we had the Ronin. We meet most of these enemies very early on the game, so there's not much to look forward to in terms of enemies for the remainder of the game. But it does help that at least it takes time to unlock all the stances to help take out these enemies. Overall though, the enemy variety in this game is just pretty bad and one of the downsides to the gameplay. But moving on from that, Ghost of Tsushima does a pretty good job with its boss fights. I fairly enjoy every single boss fight in this game. For the main story, there are a total of 5 main bosses if you exclude the opening one against Khotun Khan. Each one of these duels are really good. Again, like I talked about before, the use of parrying and dodging makes these boss fights so enjoyable. There's a little bit of a strategy to the fight of learning their attacks and I really like that. Even though you can basically learn all of their moves after just one attempt, I still enjoy it. My 2 favorite duels in the main story by far are the first one against Ryuzo and the final duel in the game against Lord Shimura. There are also some amazing duels outside of the main story. With the Mythic Tales, there are some amazing fights that are really unique from the rest of the game. With the combat being amazing, it was expected that the duels would also be very good. The last small piece of gameplay that we have is the grappling hook. This is such a fun tool to have to traverse around. It's not like a major piece of gameplay, but it's definitely a welcome addition to the game. Moving on to the next section of this video, we have the side content. The side content in this game is something that I think is pretty good in some areas, but not so great in others. The side quests in Ghost of Tsushima are really good, with the Tales of Tsushima and the Mythic Tales. But outside of that, the side content really isn't that great. Everything else they offer in the game isn't really that worth doing. You have all the Mongol territories that you can take over, you have the fox dens, haikus, shrines, and a bunch of smaller collectibles. And look, I understand in open world games like Ghost of Tsushima, you're going to have collectibles and things like this that are pretty repetitive. I would just at least want them to make them more enjoyable to do. Like most of these collectibles I got bored of getting after like 2 or 3 of them. It definitely limits the open world experience to a point when a heavy amount of it is filled with content like this. But it doesn't make the open world bad by any means in my opinion. It's just that the only worthwhile things to really do are these side quests. But let's talk about the side quests since they're actually pretty good in this game. Probably the biggest focal point of these side quests are the Tales of Tsushima, and the only ones that I'm going to talk about in this video are the ones that focus around side characters in this game. There are a total of 6 characters that have quest lines. We have Sensei Ishikawa, Lady Masako, Kenji, Norio, Yuna, and Yuriko. Some of these storylines are a lot more in depth than others, with Sensei Ishikawa, Lady Masako, and Norio being the 3 biggest in this game. Starting off with Sensei Ishikawa, his storyline focuses around a former student of his named Tomoe who has gone rogue. This is probably my favorite storyline out of all of them. I just really like the dynamic between Jin and Ishikawa. And also, the story behind Tomoe and watching it unfold was really cool to see. Then we have Lady Masako. Her questline is also really interesting. We dive into and try to solve the mystery behind her family's death. And watching it all unfold is awesome, and at some point we have to fight Lady Moscow in her seek for vengeance. I really liked Lady Moscow as a character, and watching her seek vengeance for her dead family was a great storyline. And the last one I'll talk about is Norio. This is probably my least favorite out of the big three, but it's still good. Similar to Lady Masako, Norio is out for revenge. But the interesting thing with him is the fact that he is a monk. So he has this internal battle between these two different worlds, and again, I love watching that dynamic within himself develop. I could talk about all of these and go more in depth, but I'm not trying to have this video be like an hour long, so we'll just move on from the Tales of Tsushima. The last piece of side content that I'll speak on are the mythic tales. I brought these up before when we were talking about the combat, and they are just genuinely fantastic. All of the missions revolve around some ancient myth or fables that are rooted deep into the history of the island of Tsushima. It does an amazing job of immersing you into the world even more and connecting you to the island and its history and lore. And through all these missions, you either get a weapon, an ability, or armor. My favorite mission from these is probably the Heavenly Strike. The story behind it, the mission, the set piece, the duel at the end, it just makes up for one of my favorite missions in the entire game. But all the mythic tales are fantastic and help the world building so much. I wish there were even more of these in this game. Finally, moving into the last part of this video, we have the main story and narrative. This is something that is praised in Ghost of Tsushima and people consider to be one of the highlights of this game. And I would fairly agree. I think it's a pretty good story. I don't know if I would say it's an amazing story, but I still really like it. The main focal point of the narrative revolves around Jin and his transformation from just a samurai to the ghost. And I absolutely love this concept. At the very start of the game, we have this amazing opening as the samurais attack the Mongols. But in this battle, Jin's uncle, Lord Shimura, gets captured. So the main focus of the first act of the game is to rescue Lord Shimura. And in his pursuit to save him, Jin starts to realize that the ways of the samurai are not enough. So, with the help of his new friend Yuna, he learns how to use stealth and to not be detected to take out his enemies. This completely opposes everything that the samurai are and will eventually result in a massive clash between Jin and Lord Shimura. Within the first act of Ghost of Tsushima, it heavily focuses on Jin gaining alliances and help so that they can rescue Lord Shimura. I really enjoyed the first act of this game. Meeting all the characters and just getting into everything was so much fun. My favorite part of Act 1 is probably the dynamic with Jin and Ryuzo. I always felt like a little suspicious of Ryuzo. Like that man was bringing up beef from like a decade ago and still seemed tight. I knew something was off, but him betraying Jin, having to fight him was such an amazing moment. Then when they fight again in Act 2 was also really good, and that's where Jin finally takes him out. But in Act 1, once we finally rescued Lord Shimura, we moved into Act 2. And here I'll talk about probably my biggest issue with the story. Outside of the amazing dynamic of Jin having this internal battle of being a samurai but learning the ways of the ghost, and just the dynamics that Jin has with the characters in the world itself, there's not a lot there narratively. Like I said, the personal journey that Jin goes on is amazing, and his dynamic with Lord Shimura was one of my favorite parts of this game. And also, the way that Jin inspires so many people through him being the ghost is awesome. He is this symbol of hope to them because he fights for them and is genuinely trying to save them. He has an influence on every character he interacts with and has great dynamics with them all. But outside of that, the story really just revolves around saving Lord Shimura, then, oh no, they took over Castle Shimura, we need to get that back now, and then following that, a very rushed final act to take out the Khan. It's just like the gameplay sequences get a little repetitive within the main story, with a lot of it just being you invading Mongol territories. And I understand that the story and setting focuses on the Mongol invasion, so it is going to be one of the main focuses narratively. I would have just liked to see some more variety with the main missions. But moving back into things that I love about the story, the dynamic between Jin and Lord Shimura is probably my favorite part about the entire story. I wasn't the biggest fan of Lord Shimura at first, but through Act 2 I started to really like him as a character. Their relationship falling apart is genuinely a tragedy and really sad to see. We see Lord Shimura have such a love and care for Jin, and him watching Jin go down this path of the ghost breaks his heart. At some point, Jin says that Lord Shimura is a slave to honor, which I completely agree with. And that was probably the biggest reason that the relationship fell apart. Lord Shimura was so hellbent on the ways of the samurai, and if you went against it, you were defined the samurai and had no honor. But we clearly see throughout this game where the way of the samurai would have never won them this war. But Lord Shimura would rather die with honor than win the war with cowardly tactics. I think the most heartbreaking part of their entire story though was when Jin denied becoming Lord Shimura's son and called himself the Ghost. It was my favorite moment in the entire game. The emotion behind the scene was done to perfection. Lord Shimura is basically pleading with Jin to deny the name of the ghost and to become his son. Lord Shimura never wanted it to be this way, and it broke his heart having to oppose Jin. But Jin had to become the ghost to save his people, to save the island. This was the only way. The ways of the samurai could not have saved Tsushima. And this is the first time that we hear Jin call himself the ghost. He finally takes on that title and becomes what he needs to be for the people of Tsushima. But moving on from their dynamic for now, another part of this game that I love is Khotun Khan as the villain. This man is as evil as you can get. I love when games don't give their character a redemption sometimes and just let them be evil. And this is exactly what the Khan is. There's not a good bone in this man's body. And it's like a breath of fresh air when you can just genuinely hate the villain and want to take him out without some deeper meaning to him as a character. I love the way that he used the way of the samurai against them. That's why Jin had to defy the way of the samurai, because the Khan knew how to use their morals against them, and I found that really interesting. Like, this man did so many evil things throughout the game. The worst one by far was when he cut off Taka's head. Like, that was actually one of the most disrespectful things that I have ever seen. Taka looked up to Jin so much, and to see him die like that was actually heartbreaking. And the fact that the Khan used Jin's sword, it was so terrible. Like, I was actually distraught. Like, all I could do was think about how Yuna was going to react. Like, they were so close to being free and getting away, and then this happened. It was just so sad. Yuna and Taka were some of my favorite characters in this game. Yuna is the thief that saves you at the beginning of the game and stays a prevalent part for the rest of the story. Her and Jin have a great dynamic, and they really help one another throughout the story in this game. And with Taka, he is Yuna's younger brother. This man is just way too wholesome, and Jin is always so encouraging with him. I loved Taka so much, and seeing him die the way he did was just actually so sad. But moving into one of my bigger issues in this game, I'll talk about Act 3. I just felt like this was really rushed in my opinion. I don't know, it just felt like it was such a quick turnaround from being captured at the end of Act 2 to taking down the Khan so quickly after in Act 3. Like, we don't even really have to do anything. Yuna helps find all of your old alliances, and we do a few smaller missions than just take out the Khan. It just did not feel like an ending to a game at all. They didn't build it up well, and I think the final act was hurt by how rushed it was. But even with it being rushed, the game still ends beautifully with, after taking out the Khan, we have one final duel against Lord Shimura. This, in my opinion, is such a beautiful ending to the game. It's just so sad. Even though Lord Shimura is technically our enemy, it never feels that way. Even in these final moments, you can tell neither of them want to do this. But both of them must fulfill what they believe their duty is, and I think that's what makes their dynamic so interesting. They both have such a love for one another, and having to fight to the death is a heartbreaking reality for both of them. But both of them are very loyal to who they are, with Lord Shimura never defying the samurai, and Jin being the ghost and saving his people. They do an amazing job of setting up the emotions for this fight. They have you write this haiku beforehand, and even though I usually hated doing these, it really fit well in this situation. Lord Shimura very much viewed Jin as his own son, and it pained him to do this. He even says that taking Jin's head is his own punishment. He feels as if he is being punished by having to take out the man that he views as his son. So, after you win the fight against Lord Shimura, you are faced with two options. You can either take him out or spare him. To me, sparing him would have actually just been such a terrible thing to do, so I decided to take him out and give him a warrior's death. The ending of this game is just generally so well done, and it highlights the best part of this game beautifully, which is Jin and Lord Shimura's dynamic. The story in this game is very good, and I loved it. It does have its flaws, but it still tells a beautiful story revolving around Jin. I am very interested to see what they do for a Ghost of Tsushima 2, as I feel like this game has a very concise story that really doesn't need a sequel to it. But I have my faith in Sucker Punch, and I think that it's going to be an amazing sequel. Overall, Ghost of Tsushima was a fantastic game and an amazing way to end the era of the PS4. Sucker Punch once again nailed it and made a game that so many people loved, and so did I. It has a beautiful world, amazing combat, a good story. This game does so well in so many areas. This was a game that I thoroughly enjoyed and one of my favorite games that I've played in 2024 so far. Even 4 years on from its release, it still has some of the best graphics I've seen from any game, and it holds up beautifully in every other way still. So if you're someone on Steam or just in general thinking about getting this game, I would highly recommend doing so. This is an amazing game that most people would have a great time playing. My final rating of Ghost of Tsushima is an 8.5 out of 10. It's fantastic in most ways, but does have its few flaws here and there that drop it down a bit. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate it and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the video, it would mean a lot if you guys could comment, like, subscribe, do whatever. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.